Hey, Mr. Wiener here, Mr. Wiener's History. Today we're going to talk about World War I on the home front. How does World War I affect us here in the United States? Well, you're soon to find out. This is 7.4. And you guys will be able to assess the involvement of citizens at home during World War I. Alright, so first up, all about mobilizing the economy. What are we going to do? Well, we are very ill prepared for war because we never really done anything like this before in the history of the United States, so it's kind of new for us. And so, we're ill prepared. I mean, we fought wars. You had the Civil War and, war against Britain and stuff, but never sitting, going overseas. And we weren't really prepared for this. And so, Wilson Congress and Pride all the progressive era ideals, be very efficient, government control, conformity in society. Everybody's a part of this war. It's going to be a total war effort, and everybody's all in for life. Right? And so they placed most industries under control of federal agencies. That means the government's going to regulate everything, and that means the government's going to tell factories what to make, what to do, who to hire, how people are supposed to act. And government really takes control of everything because it's kind of necessary, because if your country back at home's not in the war effort, it's going to hurt the people actually fighting. And so you need to be, totally committed, all in at home in order to win a war, any war. And so the United States is going to have this called the War Industries Board, who's going to control everything. This is the government's agency who's going to control all factories and production and purchasing. And so they attempted to operate the United States as one gigantic factory dominated by one management, the War Industries Board, which is the federal government. All right? And so factories, instead of making stuff for homes, they made stuff for the war. They made ammunition, they made airplanes, they made, vehicles, they made guns, they made clothing, they made anything and everything that you could use for the war is going to be made by the normal everyday factories. Right? Also, we're going to introduce daylight savings time. Right? That started during this time period, during World War I, daylight saving time. Right? And shorten the work week for non-related work-related factories, because we need to be totally committed. Everything to do with the war, that's what United States life is like. From 1917, 1918, we're totally consumed by World War I. Alright, unions are like, yeah, okay, we like this for, shortened work week for people who are not mixed up for war. That's a good idea. Alright, unions are happy. Alright, higher pay, better working conditions resulted in this. Things were looking up for the United States back in the home front. Women went to help in the factories. Okay, they were needed because the men were all fighting in the war. Some 4 million of them, and so women needed to be working in the factories, and so millions of jobs went to women. And if it wasn't for women, we wouldn't have all the supplies and everything needed to fight this war. But many women were like, "Hey, you need us. We're a part of society." Yet we still can't vote? What? What is going on here? Alright, because remember, they didn't get the right to vote until 1920. This is after the war. Okay, after the war, with the 19th Amendment. This hadn't happened yet. This is 1917, 1918, when this is going on. Women are basically running, the factories here. They're the ones making all the stuff, yet they still have a say on why they're doing this. So that brings the whole matter, to head. African Americans, I mentioned earlier, they're going to serve in these segregated units. They're going to still encounter discrimination, but less of it. Many African Americans are going to work in munitions factories, and like I said, this is a total effort. Men, women, and children. African American, everybody. We're all in. Okay, we're all in. The entire total war effort of the United States during 1917, 1918 is really crazy. And we just went all in, but you had to. This is going to help us win the war, of being totally committed, all in. Right? So we also had race riots in the North because, well, African Americans moved to the North to work in the factories, and much to the chagrin of people in the North. And so we had a lot of race riots going on, especially, 1919 when the soldiers came back and African Americans were like, yeah, this is our job now. Yeah, this could cause a little bit of problem, right? And this is known as the Great Migration, where African Americans are moving north after the war. Okay, they're moving north. Okay, away from the South, away from the Jim Crow laws. They're trying to live a better life, trying to make a better life for them and their family. So they're moving north, which causes a lot of tension when the soldiers come back home and, want their job back. Alright, quick review. Part 1, the United States was all in on the war effort. Women and African Americans worked in factories converted to producing war materials. The government controlled it all. Okay, it's all controlled by the government, War Industries Board, and we're all in. All in. Alright, impact on civilians. So food, don't waste it. Okay, it's going to help us win the war. And also since meat and stuff was a ration, it's called Hooverizing, serve just enough don't waste food because there's soldiers over there in Europe that need the food. And so, they ate stuff like, horse meat, dog meat, because the good meat, the beef, that went over to the soldiers. And so, in order to, help out in the effort, they're going to eat that kind of animal. And so, Hooverize, coined by, future President Hoover, who, very big economics man, economy. And so he was very popular during his time period. And he makes a rise. That's why he becomes president, because he really, he's a big deal. He's kind of a big deal. Alright? And also, people are going to plant their own garden called victory gardens. Alright? You plant your own gardens to, grow your own food for you and your neighbors. And so you don't have to rely on, the mass production of food, because that can be help serve the soldiers. So you can grow your own food, your own vegetables. So eat different kind of meat. Conserve your food, grow your own veggies, do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. If that means eating horse meat, so be it. Whatever it takes to help win the war. Okay, people's jobs back at home are just as important on the front lines. And so whatever it takes. Alright, so these efforts were very successful. Cost of war. How much is it going to cost for the war? What are we going to do about it? Well, the U.S. is spending approximately $44 million a day. And this is 1917, 1918, $44 million a day. Okay, $33 billion was spent on this war. $33 billion on a war we had nothing to do with. Okay, the war we had to go over there to save democracy, to save Europe from the tyranny of the Huns. That's what they called the Germans, the Huns. Be back the Huns, buy Liberty bonds. And so a third of it raised through taxes. Again, raise taxes because the government needs money. And the rest, well, $20 billion. That's 2/3 of the money raised from the war are actually made from bonds. Liberty bonds, victory bonds. And people are like, hey, let's buy bonds. It became an act of patriotism. It was all about buying the bonds. I am a real American. I'm going to buy bonds. Remember, like I said earlier, the bonds are government borrowing money from its citizens. Okay, we'll pay them back later on with interest. And so the citizens actually make money from this. So you give the money to the government now. Okay, and in return, in a few years, you'll get the money back with interest. Okay, so that's what these bonds are all about. Okay, and so 2/3 of the war was paid by bonds, and people spoke out against the bonds. People spoke out against the draft. Not good. So what are we gonna do? Well, we're going to propaganda. Any good war has good propaganda. So civilian needs support. So George Creel, he's going to be basically the one selling the war to America. He's the propaganda master here. Okay? He issued pamphlets. Thousands and thousands of pamphlets are written about why you should support the war, how you should support the war, and what you should do, and this is what we need for in America. Okay, people called 4-minute men who came and spoke in theaters. They stood up and spoke for 4 minutes about the war. Okay, people went to movie theaters to watch, not previews from upcoming movies, but to watch newsreels of what's going on in the war. Alright? It was all about propaganda. You need to sell the war. Sell the war. And George Creel, he's one that he sold the war to the American public. Okay, if we're not in, if we don't believe that we should be fighting this war, disaster happens. Okay? See Vietnam. Alright? If we don't believe that we should be in this war, disaster happens to George Creel and his propaganda. Propaganda is all about getting people on your side, getting people to believe in your cause. And so, the United States is very much into propaganda. There's propaganda, every war creates tons of propaganda. Right? And so, World War I is no exception. Alright? Also, Boy Scouts are very big, and at this time as well. And then, what do you do to silence people? Called the not the Alien Sedition Act, so that's the Espionage and Sedition Act. Espionage, aka spying. Alright, so you cannot say anything negative about the government. You cannot, anything that's harmful against the government, you're going to get in trouble. Okay, loyalty leagues were created so people could snitch on neighbors. Hey, George down the street over there, I think he's destroyed his neighbor's victory garden. I don't think he's speaking out against bonds. We gotta do something. Alright? And so people are becoming snitches. I mean, if you weren't in on the war effort, which people weren't, then you were shunned. You're an outcast. You can go to jail for this. You can get in trouble for speaking out against the government. Okay? For putting people in clear and present danger. As you look at Schenck coming up next. I mean, it's really ridiculous. But the question is it necessary during a time of war to squelch free speech? Okay? Think about that. Okay? So, let's say thousands of people were in prison. So, when it comes to Schenck versus the United States. Now, this is the big case here. Freedom of speech versus, United States, basically. Okay? Clear and present danger is what it was all about here. Okay? Schenck spoke out against the war. He told people to evade the draft, sent out pamphlets, anti-draft pamphlets. Do not sign up for a draft. Do not go for draft. If you get drafted, burn your draft card. Get rid of it. Okay, the war is bad. It's evil. And so Schenck, he was a socialist. And, Eugene V. Debs, the leader of the Socialist Party, actually got in prison for 10 years during this time period for speaking out against the government. And so Schenck here is like, this is bad. This is bad. Government's bad. Why are they, forcing this war down our throats? And so the ruling established the ability of the government to suppress freedom of speech because they put him in jail for this. Okay? And it's illustrating continuing conflict between free speech and government authority. Your rights are not absolute. They infringe on the rights of others. Great example of this is yelling fire in a movie theater. You can't do that. Yelling bomb on an airplane. Okay? Your rights end when they infringe on someone else's rights. It is really established with Schenck versus the United States. Okay? Yes, you have freedom of speech. But if they put the country in clear and present danger, the words you say, the words you write, put the country in danger, then you can get in trouble for that. And that's evident in Schenck versus the United States. So the question of free speech versus, the safety of America. And that's still, very relevant for today's society. And in a big case, Schenck versus the United States. Your rights are not absolute if they infringe on the rights of others. All right, war fever broke out everywhere. All right, many schools banned teaching German. Germans, even to me, we can't teach German in school. All right, this is still even more heightened in World War II and whatnot. So German Americans got mistreated. A lot of people even changed their names so they wouldn't have a German-sounding names. People won't, persecute them. It's that bad. So, big thing here, Wilson's 14 points. Goals for lasting peace. Okay? Principle of justice for all people. We need to end wars. We need to start the League of Nations, which we created but did not become a part of it. We'll talk about that more next time. And so, Wilson's 14 points. We're trying to end war. Alright, quick review here, really quick. United States is all in war effort, all in total war effort. Women and African Americans work in factories converted to wartime production, ran by the government. People conserved food, planted victory gardens, bought war bonds. George Creel sold the war. He's a propaganda master. U.S. passed Espionage Sedition Acts. Schenck versus the United States signified our rights can be limited. And Wilson issued 14 points of plan for lasting peace. And until next time, Mr. Wiedemer here. Study history.